Hello there, I'm Matt Lucas, the comedian from the TV shows, and My School magazine said I could interview anybody I wanted, and I've asked for Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer.
Hello. Don't be nervous.
I'm not nervous, I'm alright, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Good.
I wanted to ask you both what you were doing before Big Night Out, what led up to that?
Well, before that, I was at art school.
Right.
And when I came out of there, I wanted to do some kind of performance art, which led gently into the Big Night Out, which was not called the Big Night Out then, it was called Vic Reeves Variety Palladium. A bloke called Colin Broster had a comedy show on, and he booked comics and put them on every week. So he said, I'm going to pack this in and I want to take over? So I said, right, I'll take over. But I'd never been to a comedy show, so I didn't know how to book them. And I thought, if I do it all myself, I can take all the money from the door,
right,
and I don't have to bother trying to book people. So I just made it all up, and I changed it every week.
And is that how Vic Reeves was born? Did you perform under that name?
Yeah.
Where did that name come from?
I was watching a Vic Damone film, I think. I was sitting at home in my council flat one afternoon, and then I thought, I'll just make a name up. But we were making names up, like, you know, all the time, you know, and it was just throwaway. It could have disappeared the next day and been something else. It was either going to be Vic Reeves or Craig Wildfowl.
Right.
But I went for Vic Reeves. How about you?
Sorry?
How about you?
Oh, I was a solicitor before the Big Night Out.
You were?
I was a solicitor when we were doing it live.
You were, weren't you? And you were dealing with... Did you say to me once you'd become a solicitor because you sort of... A part of you wanted to change the world, but it was sort of cockroach infestation and stuff like that?
Yeah, I was what they call a welfare lawyer, you know, and I thought I could make a difference.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
When he was a solicitor and we were doing the Big Night Out at the New Cross Tavern, he used to turn up in his gowns, because we used to do...
Judge
what was
Nutmeg?
it?
Judge Nutmeg.
Judge Nutmeg,
That's
wasn't it?
justice what it's called, isn't it?
Yeah. And then he'd go back and go to court the next day, and he was told to get out by the judge because his outfit stunk and was generally covered in some filth that we were throwing about on the stage.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah! Let all people who have any manner of business before the twisted court of Judge Nutmeg gather forth and give me your attention! Right, Jingo, what do we want?
When we did the Big Night Out on the telly, I just took, I think, 10 weeks off work, and then I was going to go back to work.
That's right, yeah.
So I never moved, but I just never ever went back, and I never had the wherewithal to actually phone up and say I am not coming back. So they're still waiting.
In the wheel of justice, see how fast the bastard turns.
I went to, I don't know whether there's a first or second Vic Reeves Big Night Out.
Right.
Jim was doing it at the Goldsmiths Tavern. It was
Yeah.
in a little room upstairs. And if my memory serves me right, when I went, I think there was somewhere between 8 and 12 people there. Well, probably mostly people you knew, Jim, whatever.
Yeah.
But every person who went, invariably next week, brought people with them. So it like went from 11, 20, 40, 100, just like bang, like that, and we moved downstairs to a bigger room. You know, this was at a time when the comedy was just called not dull and political stuff, and so, which is fine, but you know, it's not my cup of tea. And you know, it was gobsmacking. It was absolutely fantastic. You got really evangelical about it. Everyone, you became fanatical. You've got to come and see this fella.
Glenn Tilbrook took me to see him. He said, you've got to see this guy, it's really funny. And I really liked him. And also, I remember going back to Vic's house and seeing his artwork. He's a brilliant artist.
Let's have a look at the back, shall we? That's it, yeah. Right, Jingo, it's in Technicolor.
You know, that's the thing that drew me to him. That's why I thought this guy is great. He's a great artist, you know, who happens to be very funny as well.
How much work did you do during the week? Did this become your week's work then? Did you have another job at the same time?
No, that's all I did. I would sit at my kitchen table and make things all week, like with cardboard and bits of cloth and that, and then wheel it all up. I used to have a wheelbarrow that I used to take things back and forth into the gig. Like bits of cardboard and sticks. With
You used to
like
make Hammond organs out of fruit and veg and stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, the Hammond organ, that was the thing we used to have on every week, and I would invite someone up onto the stage to play the Hammond organ, which was in that cardboard box.
It was very, very funny.
So you saw this,
I saw
and
this,
you
yeah.
immediately wanted to become a part of it.
So I don't think I missed a Big Night Out after that.
How long was
you
it
say you
before
want to be a part of it? It's a difficult thing to get across because people these days will think of people wanting to make a hit show. And you know, Jim, he was like just messing about.
Yeah.
So when you say like, so that bloke there, Jim would ask, will you come up and do that? Will you come in? And one week I was there.
Bob started to appear. Bob was just in the audience really to start off with at the Goldsmiths Tavern, and then he got friendly with Jim and was invited up on stage to tell us about his week at Camberwell Magistrates Court, because he was a solicitor. So they just used to have a chat on stage, and it was actually quite funny, so it got worked into the act. And then they started writing specific things together in the pub. Well, when Bob started to get more and more involved, I actually remember saying to Jim, you know, you found your only wise. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, but you're just so much like Eric and Ernie, especially with the glasses. And he couldn't see it for ages, and then he sort of picked up on it.
Where's he gone? Where's he gone? Where have you gone? Where have you gone?
They've got elements of Eric Morecambe and Spike Milligan in them, but the great thing is that they're themselves all the time. You know, it'd be no good if you were an Eric Morecambe impersonator or a Spike Milligan impersonator. Not that you could be that, but they have elements of those things. But then they're completely their own thing, and they're invented their own. And it's also that there's elements of Salvador Dali in there. You know.
So you moved from the Goldsmiths Tavern to the Albany Empire,
Yeah.
which held, what, 350?
350, but there was a lot more squeezed in. And
That's a big leap, isn't it, from about 60 in the Goldsmiths Tavern?
It was, and then we thought, well, we're going to have to, you know, it's not just our mates now. We have to, you know, because at one point you told me, so the people are from Hull have come down.
First time I saw Big Night Out, Charlie Higson had told me that he'd been to the Albany Empire, and he was infusing about these two Northerners. He said he must come down, and he tried to describe what he'd seen, and he got as far as a brie flattener. And I assume it was Bob, what it was, because I subsequently saw it, and Bob had flattened a bit of brie on a carpet tile. And that was enough for me. As soon as I heard that some brie had been flattened onto a bit, it only barely covered the carpet tile, I thought, that's the stuff.
Are you going to regurgitate the shirts to numbers?
Only certain numbers.
Right, and
Oh, the numbers 1, 2 and 3.
all right then. You want me to give the numbers?
If you want him to regurgitate, I'll need the numbers.
Regurgitate the amount of shrimps. The amount of shrimps to the number that I give.
No, he regurgitates a shrimp on
Regurgitates.
hearing any of the numbers 1, 2 or 3.
All right then. 1. Very good. 3. Very good indeed.
When I first saw Big Night Out, it was one of those things you just thought, this is really, really funny, but you couldn't really describe it to anyone or explain why it was funny. It was just very bizarre. It was very clear that this was someone who had a very strong style of their own and was not trying to copy anyone else.
We're going to do a performance piece tonight. I'm going to play the part of the proletariat, right, the cheeky cockney barrow boy. And I'm going to take the part of the oppressor. I'm going to be a police officer in a police tug. But wait, Nick. The police in the police tug, right? I as the cockney barrow boy, but also as the whale, and in the rainforest.
We still do a 3-hour show, which changed every week, which really right. But it was we had, you know, stock things in it, which never transferred to the television. There was the 3 scrutineers, which was Bob, Mickey, and Kingy, and we were like the 3 musketeers. We had musketeers hats on, didn't we? But we were scrutineers.
The 3 scrutineers, that's right. Yeah.
And we'd ask each other what we'd been looking at this week. And I was banana, wasn't I? And I just, whenever I answered anything, I had a banana on me. This week, I've been scrutinising the orphans who've been coming out of the orphan home.
The truth of it is, Matt, we've always wanted to do the scrutinies again, but we can't actually quite remember what to do.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We are actually image.
Fred Elwood, who was Les, he was around at that point, wasn't he? Was he in the show prior to you?
I can't remember Jim.
Really.
I think that he used to. I know he used to help Jim a lot. Just as an outsider looking. Do you know what I mean? He would be there when he got there, just sort of like helping, you know, organising things and so on, and being part of it. But then I think when it transferred to a bigger venue, which was the Albany,
yeah,
I think in almost developing that role, Jim had asked him to sort of be the helper, but on stage.
Yeah.
I'd already done a character called Derek the lab technician. In a white coat and glasses, a speaking character at Southend, which was a show that Vic came and sang in, Fly Me to the Moon, I think he did. So when he wanted me to stage manage at the Albany, he said, bring your white coat along that you used at Southend and your glasses. He said, but you won't be known as Derek, you'll be known as Les, and you won't speak.
I never sensed that Fred wanted to, like, perform talkie, and he did that role brilliantly. So
absolutely brilliant.
He sort of
I think
became.
Les is a real highlight. I mean, it was Vic and Bob and Les, wasn't it?
It was fantastic, yeah, and he did it to perfection.
And I used to sort of just be behind the curtain with all the props and wigs, fluffy toys, humming igloos, all sorts of bizarre things, spirit levels, chives, Vic and Bob's pointy shoes and their wigs. I mean, it would just be lined up on a table at the back with a list with a running order on. And there used to be a mad scramble for props, and I used to sort of be referee.
I mean, you're obviously incredibly successful at the Albany Empire, packing it out. Was it every week?
Oh, no, we did runs, didn't we, Jim? We did.
Oh yeah, well, it was every week. We do about 6 weeks, then have a rest, and then do another.
Right, so one night a week there.
Yeah.
But then, what happened? Were you able to take any aspect of your act to other clubs? Because there's some story that you sort of got petitioned off.
We did. We tried it a couple of times, but realised...
Because you were very, very successful, so people must have been saying, why don't you come and perform at Jongleurs or these sort of clubs?
Well, we didn't. No, we did do a couple of them, and it was an absolute disaster. I tell you, one was a funny one though, because some agent at that time said, "Do I want to go on?" You know, I don't know whether, I think it was a bit pre-Big Night Out, but Suzanne Vega was on in Regent's Park, and said, "Do you want to come on?" And it was at the outdoor theatre, and come and do the support. And so I went with two. Were you there?
Yeah, just as a bear.
Were you one of the bears?
No, we did Tinker's rucksack.
Oh, we did Tinker's rucksack. So with two bears. So these bears running around, and I was doing this crap magic and things like that. And then I came off. There was 7 of us there, like bears running around and all this thing. And then I came off. And this promoter was furious because he said, I thought it was an acoustic folk singing actually.
Well, my first impression was one of deep joy. Genuinely, we used to go every week to see him at the Albany Empire, and every week was fantastic. Even when they were crap, they were great.
It was very sort of almost like clubby sort of thing, really. You know, it
was cliquey, you know.
Yeah.
It was cliquey, wasn't it? And lots of comedians used to come. People like Jonathan Ross used to come, and isn't that right? People.
Yeah, there was always people were there all the time. There was lots of people.
And Paul Whitehouse and Charlie Higgs.
Well, how it used to work doing the live show before the telly was you'd turn up and Jim would give you a list of things he wanted you to do that night, usually unrehearsed and unprepared.
As I say, the first thing I did on it was on Novelty Island. As far as I remember, it was the Slitherer.
His first time on telly was as the Slitherer on the Big Night Out, wasn't it? In a black.
But his first, because they used to come and do things on the stage at the Albany.
Let's meet the Slitherer.
And Charlie Higgs and I were trying to get our equity cards, because in those days you had to have an equity card before you could perform on telly. And you had to have done a certain amount of live work. And one of the conditions was that a bloke from equity came down and monitored how much work you did. So I had to tell him, what's the performance? You know, he's expecting some play or something. And I said, well, I'm going to be the Slitherer on Novelty Island to the Albany Empire. And he said, and what time? I said, well, any time really, between 9:16 and 9:18. You know.
And you enjoy dressing up as a worm, right? That's right, yeah. And slithering through the undergrowth. Slither, 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 slither through the undergrowth. In an attempt to assist police, right?
I came on, did 30 seconds of slithering with a load of bin liners, and fucked off, but got my equity card.
No, unofficially, but you only do it to Morse code. Exactly. To the sound of Morse code. Exactly right. Well, if you'd like to come out here, I'll make an exception tonight and let you out of the paddock. We have got a special dispensation tonight for the Slitherer. What he's going to do is slither right across the stage to the sound of Morse code. And then it goes.
But that was sort of fill-in stuff. We had him doing Tanita Tickeram's dream sequence, where Higson was up a ladder pouring stuff into.
He was throwing dog food into a paddling pool.
Well, I was Tanita Tickeram and someone else was Rick Wakeman. It may have been Paul. I can't remember.
While someone else was in the middle of the stage trying to force a leg of lamb into an acoustic guitar.
It went on for hours. Hours and hours and hours. The audience used to get very restless in the bits, the kind of linking bits, but Jim and Bob needed a break now and then. They claimed to go and change into another character, but they would just come back here to these dressing rooms and drink weak lager.
We'd have Whitehouse and Higson there, so look, just do that. Here.
We'll be back in a minute while we get changed.
There was somewhere here that I was Tanita Tickeram, with Rick Wakeman playing a Lilo. It was very obvious to anyone who went to see Vic Reeves' Big Night Out that Jim was going to be hugely famous one day.
What happened, of course, when the early shows were getting popular, is that you know, lots of people wanted to see them because they were great, but also people wanted to, well, how can we work this into television? You know, people were going to sign them. Should this so-and-so sign them? And that kind of got into an exciting thing.
There was just a night, as I remember, without any pre-warning, that Jonathan, as I remember, that Jonathan Ross was there, and Alan Yentob was there, and Michael Grade was there.
Jim and Bob never gave a toss about trying to pander to the media types. I mean, they'd be more likely to take the piss out of anyone important turning up than lick their arses.
Knowing what you know now with hindsight, you realise that telly people would be really interested, but to us it was gobsmacking. But you realise now that yes, people are always looking.
So you never even dreamed that you could do this on television? It just wasn't part of it?
No, it was nothing more. It kind of was. It was the highlight of the week for me. You know, like it was just Thursday night. He got very drunk. It was cool. That's as far as it went.
Jonathan Ross and myself, we'd started Channel X to do the Last Resort talk show, and we've been doing that for a couple of years and doing other bits and pieces. And when we went down to Deptford to see, you know, the Big Night Out, we just thought this would possibly, you know, make a fantastic TV show, and we didn't know how. I mean, because it was 3 hours long.
It's yourself, no, not me. Since you announced the competition in the popular press, people, the press is in my hand always. This fetching number here, beautiful. What's that? I'm not quite sure.
I can't sort of express too much how much of a fan I was really of it. It was, and Charlie and I were we were quite purist about it, and we thought when they were talking about, you know, doing it on telly, we were like, you have to keep it 3 hours long, this ramshackle nonsense, you know. And I think it was someone at Channel X, I can't remember who, said, no, just do it half hour, and we were quite indignant, you know. It's just like, you know, it's like tinkering with smoke on the water or something, you know.
I was absolutely appalled that they were saying they were going to do it as a half-hour show. I thought, how can you possibly get the whole essence of this fantastic 3-hour live show into half an hour? I thought you'd have to lose a lot.
I love the smell of manure. I love the smell of the poor. I love the smell of Frank Muir.
What we did is we condensed the things that we knew worked on stage and would work on television. So we had, and you know, we had to, because we were used to doing 3-hour shows and we'd ramble on, and we didn't have any sort of, there was no time problems with, you know, what we were doing on stage, but we had to get it all crammed into 25 minutes. So we had to rehearse it in respect to that.
You also, as far as I know, had very limited time in which to record the shows, is that right? You had sort of 25 minutes, but you only had about an hour in which...
I mean, I seem to remember
we just used to do straight through.
I don't remember ever... I mean, so there's probably other people who could tell you who produced it, but I don't remember ever on Big Night Out doing, you know, a pick-up.
the actual show itself was pretty well, we just left it alone, because you can't really tamper, you know, with, or couldn't still now, with really what you know, Jim and Bob do. You either, you know, you're a fan and you go with it, or you have nothing to do with it. You know, they quite polarise people. So we just thought the best thing would, you know, get a set, run it like it was a mini live show. People would, you know, they would come on, the acts would come on. It'd run it almost in real time. I don't think any of them recordings took longer than about 40 minutes.
You would just run the TV show all the way through, would you? Because we know now that we stop and start and stop and start, don't we, with Shooting Stars? But when you did Big Night Out, you'd pretty much just record it in...
That was my memory, because we would be sprinting round the back to get changed, and you had to bang. It was. My guess would be, someone may tell me with, my guess would be that for those 30-minute shows, we probably recorded 40 minutes.
Yeah, we just banged straight through it. We were very athletic in those days.
Right.
We could quite easily leap backstage and be dressed in another outfit within, I would say, what, about 12 seconds?
Well, I would go on at the beginning of them, and it would be with the Germans. You know, if you look, if I would have, say, a Graham, I don't know, whatever, whoever was coming on, Captain Bird's outfit. Underneath that was a Man with a Stick outfit, and underneath that was a Wavy Davy outfit or whatever. So that I just had to go through a door, come. So those door switch changes are real time. We didn't have to cheat them, I don't remember cheating.
Occasionally you can see a slight...
Yeah, there's probably a few, yeah. If Jim had to get changed, because Jim couldn't go on at the beginning wearing 3 outfits, you know. Do you know what I mean? There must have been times we had to stop, but...
Now, what happens, I'm assuming, is as soon as you move to television, they bring in other people to work on the show, editors, producers, directors, and you suddenly start having to explain a lot of the things that you do, don't you, and justifying them. Did you find it hard Did you find it hard to get the live show onto TV?
No,
do you know what? No one knew what we were doing anyway. So, like, it seems to work, and they know what they're doing. So let them do it.
It didn't surprise me that they got a show like that on national television. I could see how it might have surprised a few people, but I mean, when you looked at the Tube, what a shambles that was, and how that was sort of made up as it went along, you know, and some of the things that you know you've made it's pretty odd. So nothing surprised. You know, I think it's great that something like that got on. I think the Tube, in lots of ways, opened the door for experimental television of that sort. They thought actually people will watch stuff that isn't necessarily bang on professional or sharp, but people watch it because it's like interesting and like out there, and they don't know what's going to happen next.
One of the things that went was fuck off Toff.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I wonder why.
With a friend of theirs called Dorian, who did a character called the Toff, who would basically come on and basically the whole audience would just shout fuck off Toff at him. But then when Jonathan Ross came round, they got Jonathan Ross to come on stage, and they all just shouted fuck off Ross at him. So that was their attitude towards celebrity.
How many have you got there then? 3? Fuck off.
When we took it onto the TV and condensed it all, it had a bit more sort of a narrative thing. Like, it was my show, but I was, you know, it was Vic Reeves' show, but he was incapable of holding it all together, and everyone else was sort of like doing better than him and picking on him and things like that.
Reeves, you neglected to include me in your last show. You forgot you were dealing with Lister. I have obtained an injunction from the Dutch courts. I've informed your producer, and I've also informed that little prat with the stick that you usually have on. I've got my own spot now, Reeves. Listen, you might learn something.
It sort of, so it had that little family that seemed to sort of work together.
Tell us how Novelty Island came about.
Well, that was just a little talent competition with it that we used to have on at the Albany.
And the first person we're going to meet tonight at Novelty Island is a fella who simply goes by the name of Lionel Ridley. Lionel Ridley, who's a cashier from Leeds, and he's a document burner.
I think it'd be funny if it was from behind a picket fence and people were trapped in there.
It was great for the telly. It was an easy way to get half thought through ideas on and off quickly. You know?
Yeah.
Those little ideas on Novelty Island would probably equal 10 minutes on a live show, wouldn't they? Those little acts.
His hairstyle answers the call of the wild, and he got the idea after he startled Nicholas Witchell off the news. So there we are. And tonight you'll be posing the question, bra or pond?
I was useless as a script consultant on their programme. I loved doing it. It was a fantastic job. But as I say, I'm a fan, so it was pointless. I'd walk in and just laugh at everything they did, and so I'd always say, "Don't forget to fall over." That was my only tip every week.
Bob! Bob! Bob, I've fallen!
But we would do something like, say, talcum powder and turnips.
Yeah.
Right? And the people making the show wondered whether they really wanted to be associated with it. You know, they would say, you know, like, please, not this.
They would just come on in sort of bad leotards and just throw a lot of talcum powder around and throw turnips. And it wasn't particularly funny and would really screw up the set.
They kind of had to trust us because they thought it was all bollocks.
But it got to that state, you know, like producers like Alan, Mark, who's over there, would think, oh, this is all going so well, and then we'd come in and say, look, we want to do talcum powder and turnip. So I'd look at it and then sort of look up and think, I thought it was going so smoothly until I saw this.
Is it hard to justify when you have those discussions? No, he must come on, we must have this prop.
That's all we could do, because you know what I mean, Matt, when I say, like, there's you know, what's worse, a bloke with a stick with a shout on the end of it, and you know, like, on his head, or talcum turnips, you know, they're all, you know, like, no one's worse or better. You can't justify any of them. So, you know, you can't really hold...
Talcum turnips was so fine, wasn't it?
It was mighty fine, that, Matt. That was... If you listen, as I remember, if you listen all the way through talcum turnips, you can just hear us sniggering.
I get a sense that you both had a lot of fun when you did the Stots as well.
Oh, that was...
Stots is always funny, yeah.
That was always good fun. I don't know where they came from.
David, you just stop starting. If it goes that way, I'll start on you yourself. Now, who's the guest reviewer? Start stopping!
I know where the voice came from, because when I was at school and I used to sort of do canoeing, and there was this bloke who used to come and do the canoeing with us, and he had Donald Stott's voice. Oh, so how do I get into this canoe then? And I used to just be creased up in my canoe, like I had to do Eskimo rolls because I was laughing my head off. No, I don't think I can do that.
What do we say when we meet a man with a stick?
What's on the end of the stick, Vic?
What's on the end of the stick, Vic? We cry out. I wonder, are you going to reveal what's on
the... A big part of your comedy was catchphrases.
Oh, you had to mention it, didn't you?
No, you had to put that wet shirt on.
It's a simple thing. You had to mention it. You wouldn't let it lie, would you?
It's kind of the worst thing for someone to say to you that, because you think, oh, is that all you see? But that was part of the appeal, things like you wouldn't let it lie, and Lister had many.
You're right fop, aren't you?
All those catchphrases came out of something that wasn't a catchphrase initially, because we did try, I think in the second series, we tried to contrive them, they don't work. It has to be something that you just naturally say a lot.
You know, with Man with a Stick, there was no what's on the end of your stick. I don't think. It was just that immediately you come out at the Albany Empire with a big stick. So, you know, I think this is right. You know, people, there'll be probably just one person, the first thing is, send me a stick.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Lovely long stick there. And I wonder what we've got on the end of the stick tonight. As the ladies and gentlemen all cry out. What's on the
And you know, as I said, whenever we tried to contrive one, it didn't quite happen. Or alternative, probably more regularly, something that you couldn't possibly have spotted that was going to be a catchphrase. It just became, it's like, I'm telling you, shopkeeper, you know, it's far too elaborate.
Yeah.
That would have just been, it just said,
yeah.
It would have just been said,
phrase,
but then then suddenly there's a certain appeal to that and people want to hear you.
It's just like you say, you know, like in Novelty Island, so that's very poor, that.
Very poor.
Very poor. Very poor indeed.
And then that would just sort of, if you say something naturally over, you know, over a couple of weeks, then it becomes a catchphrase. But that's how that evolved.
Lister was fantastic.
Well, he was my nemesis, and that's what it was all about, really. It was like my show, but it was always being attacked by a collection of nemesises. Or nemesi.
Victory is mine. You cannot deny the verdict of the ginger pop star's hair. The truth is outraged. No longer the smug getter. Quality has prevailed. and the voices in my head are silenced.
I think it was the last ever big night out. I think we had a prop section of the desk, which Jim was going to smash Lister over the head with at the end. He went to the wrong end. Got a great big piece of... Oh, God, that hurt. Really
but we used to really smack each other up as well, you know, there wasn't any... We made a decision, if one of us is going to get hit, we have to hit each other.
And we're going to see just how fast a bit of bar can go. I reckon we can get Mach 1.
I don't know why, it was what it was, our stupidity. Like, we convinced ourselves that it's never as good if you don't actually hit. And of course it is. It just takes a bit of thought and camera angle and that, but we used to think, it'll work, if Jim really hits me, it'll look great. It doesn't always, but...
But we used to, yeah, I mean, we'd come away with wounds at the end of the night.
I want to talk a little bit more about Les, because he was incredibly popular.
Yeah.
Part of the show, it was the three of you, really, Vic and Bob and Les. And when you finished Big Night Out, you didn't work with him anymore. What happened?
I don't have any recollection of anything happening. I think it was just simply a case of we wanted the Big Night Out gone, you know, and now it's the smell. But I think always the Stotts crept through. We could never get rid, in our mind, of the Stotts. And so, in a sense, it was just a clear out, really.
We'd done the big night out, and that was, we couldn't really feel that we wanted to take it any further, and we wanted to do something else. We wanted to do more of a sketch show.
Do you know what I hate most about you, Reeves?
What?
Your top half.
I mean, Vic and Bob have always tapped into a sort of long history of Northern comedy, and it always famously, a lot of it has never translated to the South. There's always been a very strong North-South divide on that. Back in the music hall days, the Southern acts would tour the Southern theatres, and the Northern acts would tour the Northern theatres, and the Scottish acts would do theirs, and there was very, very little crossover. And the comedy was always very different, and the Northern humour has always had the sort of love of language and getting into the slightly odd areas of language and relishing language.
Actually, if you look at their stuff, the use of English is sublime. If I were able to do it, I wouldn't be here talking about it. I'd have done it, but they did it, and obviously I can't rise to their heights, or I would have done it.
If people would ask the question, was the Big Night Out comedy or performance art? It is comedy, essentially. But what's great about it, it's got one little toe in the water of performance art, and it's got one, but sort of laughing as well, and one toe in the water of sort of surrealist comedy.
The funny thing about Big Night Out on the telly is by the time they got to do it on the telly, they'd been doing it live for so long that you could see that they were almost slightly fed up with some of their own catchphrases. You wouldn't let it lie, for instance.
Lie. You couldn't let it lie. You couldn't let it lie. Get off with it.
It got into such bizarre, over-the-top realms on the TV that you sort of forgot where it had come from, and you could sense that really it was the kind of the full stop at the end of the Big Night Out was to do it on the TV, preserve it in that format, and then move on to something new.
I don't know if it ended at the right time. I would like to have seen more Big Nights Out, I think, but they chose to move on, and I don't know why I don't know what the reasoning behind it was for not doing any more. But we're only 2 series.
Yeah.
No, obviously I'd like to have seen a lot more. There you are.
I'm going to finish by asking you if you have a favourite memory of Big Night Out.
But for me, Big Night Out, I mean, my favourite overall memory, in an overall sense, was I could never get over the sense of wonder when we went into that studio and saw the realisation of some of the props we'd written. Every week that was just a joy to walk in there and see someone's interpretation, because we wouldn't give them much help. We'd send a little chitty in saying, could we have the world's biggest diamond with a puppy encrusted in it? And it was lovely to see what they made of it, because we would never tell them anymore. But in terms of what was on the television, For me, it has to be talcum powder and turnips. Yourself?
For me, it's talcum turnips. You know, that was the high point. It's always nice to have a spot in the show that you really look forward to. And you can drive it along and wait until you can go and do talcum turnips, because that was the peak. I think it's probably the peak of my entire career. Another great moment was when Vic Reeves died at the end, killed by Lister.
He finally got the FOP.
Yeah.
Lister. He finally won. I never doubted he would. He wasn't a man to be messed with.
Well, it's always great to be killed off.
It sort of sticks in my craw, but they're the best. They really are. For me, they're the best. That's it. I hate saying that, but they are the best.
Well, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you, Matt, for your interest and your support over the years.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Well, that's nice, isn't it?
Thank you, Matt.